I usually just plant the top of the root ball level with the soil. I'm going to plant this one a little higher because we're going to add some stuff to this pot. What's up, Lazy Dog fam? Hope all y'all are having a fantastic day. It is Tuesday, August 8th here in South Georgia, and lately we've been getting a lot of questions about, can you grow a fig tree in a pot, or does it have to go in the ground? So I figured it'd be a great time to plant one in a pot, show you how we do it, and be sure you stay tuned towards the end of the video. We'll have a nice little discount coupon for those of you who've been wanting to try a fig tree but haven't yet. But before we plant a fig tree in that pot, I want to talk about watering and irrigation a little bit. So a couple weeks ago, I was at a fig meetup event in the big city of Watkinsville, Georgia, just a little bit south of Athens, talking to a bunch of different fig growers there. And I was surprised to hear how many of them do not have an irrigation system on their fig trees. Now, we're big believers in having a drip irrigation system for our fig orchard here. In fact, I just ran it all night last night because it's been pretty hot and dry around here. But in talking with other fig growers, a lot of them say that irrigation isn't necessary. They cite the fact that figs originated in a semi-arid climate over there in the Mediterranean. They also mention the fact that if you water them too much, the figs can split. And a lot of people say that if you give them too much water, the figs kind of lose their flavor a little bit. Now, in talking with a lot of the growers at that event, they were astounded to hear that each of the trees in our orchard gets around 30 to 40 gallons of water a week via our irrigation system. And yeah, that sounds like a lot of water. So why is the irrigation system so beneficial for us, but maybe not for other growers? So I think it has a lot to do with soil type. We have very sandy soils here that drain really well. We've had 6 to 10 inches of rain before, and I've never seen standing water or a mud puddle out here in our fig orchard. Now, if you have harder soils or clay soils, obviously your moisture retention is going to be a lot better. And in those soils, you probably do, on occasion, have to worry about things being too wet. So even giving these trees as much water as we do, like I said earlier, I've never seen standing water out here in our fig orchard. I've also rarely had any issues with figs splitting due to there being too much water at one time. We can get a bunch of rain and I hardly ever see a fig split, and that probably has a lot to do with the fact that our soil drains so well. And lastly, I personally never noticed a huge loss in flavor from irrigating. We have that big brown turkey tree towards the front of the property. It's not on any kind of irrigation. These figs out here that are on irrigation taste just as good as those figs do, but we get a lot more growth and a lot more consistent production out of these trees that we water. So even if you have just a few trees, do some testing for yourself. Don't go by only what I say. Don't go by what someone who doesn't irrigate says. Test it out for yourself. Maybe try watering your trees a lot more and seeing if you get some increased production, seeing if you do get a lot of splitting. If you're starting to get a lot of splitting, that may tell you, hey, I need to back off my soil. My trees don't need that much water. But if you have really well draining soils like we do, I think there's a big benefit to giving them more water. Now, there is one more reason I think a lot of growers don't have an irrigation system on their fig trees. I'm not sure you could get them to admit this, but I think it has a lot to do with the spacing and the organization of their trees. So a lot of growers I see just have trees kind of scattered all over their property. The trees aren't necessarily in a linear row. It makes it really hard to design an irrigation system because you've got to have mainline tubing connecting between each tree. If your trees are just randomly placed in a big backyard, that makes the irrigation system really, really tough. But if your trees are in rows like these are, the irrigation setup is really, really easy. You just run the mainline tubing alongside your trees. We have ours covered up with pine straw, and then we have that tubing buried between each of these rows, so it's all connected. Makes the irrigation system really easy to install. Also makes mowing so much easier. If you've just got a bunch of random trees scattered about, you got to mow around every single one of those trees. But if you've got them in rows like this, all we have to mow is this little lane. Now, if you already have a few fig trees, you probably already know this, but just as a disclaimer, growing fig trees and collecting different varieties can become quite the addiction. So if you think you're going to end up with more than just a few fig trees on your property, I would really consider how those trees are spaced and how they're planted. Makes things a lot easier when you plant them in a linear row. Now, I know that doesn't work with everyone's property, but if you've got plenty of room, think about putting them in a row, because it's going to make watering them a whole lot easier. All right, so now let's talk about growing fig trees in pots, which a lot of people do. We'll talk about why you would want to plant them in a pot versus in the ground, and then we're going to transfer this nice little Salem dart tree here to this big pot. So reason number one why you want to grow a fig tree in a pot is the obvious one. If you live somewhere where it gets really, really cold, you're going to want your tree in a pot. That way you can protect it easier. You can bring it inside during a cold spell. Now, it is my experience that figs don't really like temperatures in the low teens or below. That's when you can start to see some dieback. So if you live somewhere where you're frequently getting temps in the low teens or below during the winter, you probably want to grow your figs in a pot as opposed to in the ground. Reason number two you'd want to grow a fig tree in a pot would be if you had limited space. My buddy Matthew up in the great city of Athens, Georgia, has all his fig trees planted in pots, and he's got them in a linear row in his backyard there with a nice little drip irrigation system on those trees. So if you've got more trees and you've got yard, you can certainly grow them in pots, and they'll do well and still produce some nice figs for you. So if a pot is going to be the permanent home for your fig tree, the next obvious question is, how big a pot do you need? And this is what I always say. Use the biggest pot you can find, but that you can still move. I don't know exactly how big this pot here is, but if I had one that was, I don't know, 2 to 3 times the size, I could probably still move that tree. You don't want to plant in a pot so big that you can't move it inside if you need to, but the bigger the pot, probably the better. And then the third reason you'd want to plant your fig tree in a pot is maybe you're just not ready to put it in the ground yet. Maybe you're waiting to clear some property to start your own little fig orchard, or maybe you want the tree to get a little bit bigger before you put it in the ground. That's a great idea if you're in zone 7. A larger tree is going to be a lot more cold tolerant than a baby tree like this one right here. So there's a lot of benefit to growing it in a pot for a couple more years, letting it get nice size, and then putting it in the ground. And so if your tree's just going in a pot temporarily for a year or two, there's lots of different options of what kind of pots you can use. So these are the 4x9 pots that we ship our trees in. I've left trees in these pots for over a year, and they've been just fine. But if you want to step them up to a larger pot, a lot of people have these laying around. You could use one of these. This pot here is a little bigger than that one. And then Greenhouse Megastore also has these larger versions of the tree pots we use. I think these have a 6-inch wide design on them and a little deeper. This would work great as well. So to plant our Salem dart tree in a pot, first thing we need to do obviously is put some soil in there. I'm going to use some of these composted wood chips that we've used in our raised bed garden. Try to use up these before the morning glories take over the world there. So we're going to fill this pot mostly with some of this good stuff right here. All right, so we've got our composted wood chips in the pot here, probably about 3/4 of the way full. We've got our fig tree we pulled out of the pot. Some of the bottom of the root ball kind of fell apart a little bit, but we've still got a pretty nice root structure here. Now, when you're planting fig trees, there's no need to plant them real deep. I usually just plant the top of the root ball level with the soil. I'm going to plant this one a little higher because we're going to add some stuff to this pot. So now I'm going to add a little bit of this really good Alana Miles mushroom compost to this pot. We've seen how well fig trees do when you have a little bit of this in there. So we'll smooth that around a little bit. And then lastly, I'm going to add a couple handfuls of this Coop Grow fertilizer in here. Give some nice nutrients between those composted wood chips, mushroom compost, some of this Coop Grow here. Man, this tree should really take off here in about a week or so. And so we've set it right here on a pallet outside the greenhouse with some of our other trees, and we'll leave it here. We won't plan on putting this one in the ground. We'll just grow it in this pot forever. That way we can give you guys updates on how it's growing, show how to prune a fig tree in a pot, all that good stuff. And if you noticed, some of these little brown spots on the leaves there, that's just rust that happens around here this time of year. No big worries, nothing really wrong with the tree. It'll drop those leaves and put on new leaves soon. So for those of you who are wondering, hopefully that answers some of your questions as far as can you grow a fig tree in a pot, why you'd want to grow a fig tree in a pot, how big a pot you should use, and how to actually plant one in a pot. And as promised at the beginning of the video, we do have a little promotion running right now for those of you who are wanting to try fig trees for the first time. It starts today, Monday, when this video airs, and will last a week. So it will expire next Monday. So you can use the coupon code FIGPOT, one word, all lowercase, on our website and get 15% off any of our fig trees. Now, we do have quite a few varieties that are out of stock at the moment. We won't have any more of those until next year, but we do have some awesome varieties still in stock. We've got White Marcel's, which is a nice cold hardy fig. We've got G.E. Neri, which makes those monster, almost baseball sized figs. We've got some Mary Lane trees, which just make a beautiful tree, really tasty honey fig. So still some really good options on the site if you want to give them a try and maybe plant one in a pot like we did today. So I hope you enjoyed the video today. You can find all our fig varieties and that Coop Grow fertilizer on our website at lazydogfarm.com. And if you want to see some of these trees kind of in full production mode, they're kind of in their summer lull now. They'll kick back up here in another few weeks. But if you want to see them in their full production mode and see what some of these figs look like, check out this video right here we did a few weeks ago showing a bunch of different figs from all of these trees in our orchard. So check that out, and we'll see you next time right here at Lazy Dog Farm.